30th, 31st Veterinary Medical Board meeting. Welcome, and we'll go ahead and call for the order. Roll call.
Ms. Bowler?
Here.
Dr. Bradbury?
Here.
Ms. Laredo? Dr. Nunez?
Here.
Ms. Prado?
Here.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Here.
Ms. Yanis?
Here.
Dr. Noland?
Here.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Thank you very much. Now I would like to welcome to the meeting. It's exciting to see people that are willing to come and share their views and help us. I'd like to go ahead and open it now for introductions if you so wish to introduce yourself from the public.
Ken Blau, CVMA. Grant Miller, CVMA.
Valerie Fenster, CVMA.
Alan Andretti, the fourth, base, Veterinary Allied Staff and Education.
Sandra Snyder, Veterinary Allied Staff Education.
Dr. Al is ready, Veterinary Allied Staff Education.
Justin Sotelo with the board.
Welcome.
Jeff Pollard, MPC.
Karen Halbo with PCA Regional Affairs.
Kurt Bills, actually for animals.
Marilyn Jasper, Humane Society of Sierra Foothills. Nancy Early, California Article Association.
Dick Sullivan, NBC.
All hamsters lovingly and legally.
Susan Fibbin, locally and legally.
Bob Whalen, Analytics.
Anita Levy, California Article Association. Cindy Sibley, Sacramento Association.
Bill Gage, Social Compassion and Legislation.
Allison Mott.
I'm Tim Eastman from Steinbeck Country Plant Clinic in the California Rodeo Board.
Tim Baldwin from the California Rodeo Association.
Scott Morecamp, Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association.
Great board, Roundtable Veterinarian in Central California and including Veterinarian for Rodeo.
Ron Denbar with the Rodeo.
Kimberly Fire Department, Consumer Affairs.
Brian Clifford, Department of Consumer Affairs.
Stacey Evans, General Counsel, Open Appliances. Liz Houston and UPU.
Ryan Dallin, International Offshore Warehouse Union.
I'm the police, LWU, California Advocacy.
I'm Pastor E.T. Davis. Mark Cushing, Cameron Policy Group.
So I'd like to also introduce our new licensing manager, Tim Rhoda. Tim comes to us from California Architects Board. He was there for 14 years. And he has all sorts of experience with regulations and rulemaking packets. And so he's a great addition to our team. So welcome Tim. And also we have Justin Sotelo. He's our new policy analyst. And he also, the last 3 years he took a break from state service, but he was at California Architects Board working with Tim for a long time. How long were you there? 10 years there, and he also has a lot of experience in licensing, regulations, all the rulemaking process. He was a licensing manager at Architects Board, so they're two great additions to our team, so I'd like to welcome you guys.
Okay, we're going to move on then to public comment. I would also, though, respectfully request that if you have public comment specifically for the rodeo, we do have that agendized as number 7, and we'll welcome lengthily if needed public comment then. And also, if you're here specifically for the emergency fee increases, it is agendized actually as 10A, and we would welcome that during that discussion as well. So, any other public comment at this moment?
Good morning, John Pascoe from UC Davis. I'd just like to register a concern that we're having with the license processing times. I met with board staff in the fall to review a couple of issues related to university licensing, but this is an ongoing problem. I know there are staffing issues with the board, but I think it's important that the board understand the consequences of these delays in licensing. They're limiting access for pet owners in California to high-quality care because more than 50% of the referrals that we receive come from practitioners and specialists. But more important, it's limiting our ability to deliver our state mandate to train veterinary students to be veterinarians and veterinarians to be veterinary specialists. Currently, Well, if you recall, those of you that were involved in the several years deliberation for university licensing, we were assured at the time when we were moved from exempt status, which is the most common form of licensing in veterinary schools in North America, that the licensing process would take 4 to 6 weeks, and it's currently taking at least 12 to 16 weeks, probably longer. And that's being exacerbated by people that were trying to get licensed, calling the board, going to voicemail boxes that are full, and emails that are not being returned. And I have personal experience just recently, within the last 2 weeks, of emails that I personally have sent to staff that have not been returned. So I realize this is not an agendized item. I realize there are probably extenuating circumstances on the staff side, but this is something that urgently needs to be resolved for us to be able to meet our mandated mission for the state of California and the people of California. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, looks like we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 4. We're going to go ahead and review and approve the board meeting minutes from the October meeting, but the November meeting was just recently adapted and given to us, so we will go ahead and approve those tomorrow, so that'll give the board time to take a look at the new adjusted board meeting minutes. So, any comments on the October meeting minutes from the board? Christina.
On page 7, the first paragraph, it just says my name is, page 7, first paragraph, it just was, instead of Dr. Bradbury, it says Dr. Bradford.
At least it's not Dr. Waterford.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone, any other comments? Okay.
I had a couple of little typos, and Tara, I know you gave us a new set this morning. I don't know if there's included in it, but, and there's one specific thing that I saw that was incorrect. Let's see here. On page 4, the 4th paragraph from the bottom, Dr. Bradbury questioned why. Just these are dumb, but right here.
Oh, thank you for that.
And on page 5, in the 4th, again, paragraph, Dr. Waterhouse stated that she pays for RVTs in her practice. It says, and Dr. Nunez agreed to do the same, but that's incorrect. Dr. Nunez stated that his practice did the same thing, and I think it should be corrected on the record. One thing I wanted to draw attention to, and I'm not quite sure about it, but in the paragraph here, Ms. Sieverman presented the 2 scenarios, the initial registration fee, the RVT initial registration fee, we say went from $160 to $200. Was that correct? Mark, I think you had a question on that, so I'm going to...
Yeah, I actually watched the webcast about 3 days ago, and for the initial registration fee, it said it was going to increase from $160 to $250, not $200. Everything else was correct.
And then on page 6, for me, the paragraph, the second from the bottom.
Can I add something to page
I'm
5?
sorry.
Just while we're still on page 5, at the bottom of the second paragraph, just for clarification, I think it should read, the board yesterday shows, the new document provided to the board yesterday shows the increase of all fees to the statutory cap. That just clarifies it a little bit better, because we raised everything as much as we could in that proposal, in that initial proposal.
Okay, yeah, I've just, again, these are little typos. On page 6, second paragraph from the bottom, Dr. Miller noted the dental board's policy to only collect records. If it's, And then on page 9, again, a couple little guys. The bullet, Ms. Bowler moved and Dr. Bradbury seconded, to approve the proposed regulatory changes as modified. There should be an "and" direct the executive director. Or a comma, yeah, right here. And then I didn't understand, there's a sentence down under number 16. It says, Ms. Seiferman updated the board on AB 528. This bill will allow veterinarian to report information reasonably possible, but not more than 7 days. I think that needs to reasonably time. I don't know what it's supposed to say exactly.
This is awkward.
And I think, and that was it for me on the typos, so thank you, sorry.
Any other comments?
Can I just clarify that last edit?
Yes.
Right now, the document that you have before you says to report information as soon as reasonably possible, and that reflects the language of AB 528.
So we need to say as soon as?
Yeah, so in the document that we provided this morning on the first document, it makes that correction. It adds "as soon as."
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other comments? I just have one, and I unfortunately didn't go back and watch the tape to find out if I actually said this, but
Read the transcript.
on, on page 5, at the end, at the last paragraph of page 5, it says, Dr. Nolan highly suggested, I think it was strongly suggested, that the public members, I meant members of the public, so somehow it got to be public members, and I meant members of the public contact their legislators, who may assist the board with the AG fee increase. And then I think you caught all the rest, so. Okay, do I have a motion to approve minutes?
So motioned.
Second.
Call for the vote. Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. My apologies.
Dang, I was hoping you were all here for the minutes.
Call for the vote.
Ms. Bowler. Ms. Bowler.
Oh, I'm sorry. Aye.
Dr. Bradbury.
Yes.
Dr. Nunez.
Yes.
Ms. Prado.
Yes.
Dr. Waterhouse.
Yes.
Ms. Yanis.
Recused.
Dr. Noland.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Item number 5, report and update from the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Good morning, President Nolan, members, and Executive Officer Seiferman. It's my pleasure to be with you today, and really thank you for allowing me this opportunity to provide you an update from the Department of Consumer Affairs. So I'm happy to be joining you, and I recall visiting you in October, right after I had just actually been appointed and the announcement came out. So I'm in a more official position now, and officially serving as the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs. So I would like to actually just begin that just with a little bit about myself. I don't think I went over this last time, but I've really been with the department. It's really been my home. I've been there for 30 years at the Department of Consumer Affairs, and about 20 years with the medical board. I started out as a student assistant with barbering. Actually, at the time, it was just the Board of Cosmetology. So I have a lot of background within the Department of Consumer Affairs, and it's really just my honor to be appointed by Governor Newsom, and I really look forward to working with our current agency secretary, Podesta, and our new agency secretary. Hopefully you all received that information, new Secretary Castro Ramirez, who was just recently appointed, but she won't be starting until March. So we'll be looking forward to working with her, and then all of the boards and bureaus as well, to really improve consumer protection in California. So with that, I just wanted to go over a little bit of an email that I actually sent out to all of the department employees, just really going over what my initial focus is going to include. Some things that are really important to me and I really want to improve throughout the entire department is really looking at client services and satisfaction, because every position that's within the department, they play a critical role in improving efficiency and quality services to the boards and bureaus, so they can really in turn provide best experiences to meet your mission of consumer protection. Working smarter together, that's really important for me. We have a lot of talent within the department, and really using the resources that we have and working collaboratively and creatively actually to move things forward in a way that maybe we need to look at differently than in the past. And I think we really need to revamp some of the businesses and the processes that we follow. And then data transparency and action. So we need to use data and technology to better inform our decision-making, so action plans are developed to drive down licensing and enforcement timelines and provide measurable achievements. And the boards and bureaus have all been having to provide information about how long it takes to license or how long their enforcement process is, but really looking at statistics and data within the department. How long is it taking to process a personnel package? How long is it taking to process a contract? How long are we taking to process regulations? And so getting metrics around the DCA central services as well, so we can look at that. I heard a quote lately from actually I was interviewing someone and they said, you know, what gets measured gets done. And so I think that's really important, and looking for ways that we can really improve those services. So there's 4 main areas that I want to focus the energy based on that input, and that the first one obviously is looking at the time frame for processing regulations. I know that it's taken a while to get the regulations through. There was a change in the process. I want to go back, revisit that, and really look at the whole regulation process and see if there's ways that we can improve that time frame, because you can't implement the laws that have been put together to you unless you get those regulations through to implement them. So that's something that we're going to be working on, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Obtaining fiscal reports is another thing that's important to me. Right now, as all of you probably are aware, it's hard to get expenditure and revenue reports out of the fiscal system. I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment too, but you know, that's one of the pain points. A lot of the issues that I want to address are things that when I was at the medical board that we had to deal with, and you know, were things that were important that we weren't able to obtain. Decreasing the time frame to perform investigations, working with the Division of Investigation, getting those timeframes, because the longer the investigation takes, you know, those individuals are usually practicing during that time. So we want to make sure that we can expedite that investigation process. We actually will have a report that will be coming out. We actually went in and did an evaluation of the Division of Investigation. We did a lot of surveys. That report will be coming out in about a month, and so we're hopeful that that has improvements that we're actually already working to implement before the report is actually released. ADA compliance is something that we need. All of our websites need to be ADA compliant, as well as all the documents that are on them. So we need to work together, the American Disabilities Act, making sure that our websites are places that individuals can go and get information. And then the last thing is really ensuring that the legislation that gets passed is actually being implemented by the boards and bureaus, and not just future legislation, but past legislation that has passed. So taking a real hard look at that to make sure that's happening. So I also have the goal of holding one-on-one meetings with all of DCA's boards and bureaus to learn more about their goals and issues each of one of them is facing. But as you may be aware, the department currently has several vacant positions in our executive leadership, including our chief deputy director and several deputy directors. So I look forward to scheduling these meetings with board and bureau leadership once I have that executive team staffed and reaching out to them. As far as the regulations unit, you're probably all aware, I believe it's been spoken about here, that the DCA legal office has created a regulations unit that now is directly assisting with the processing of departmental rulemaking packages. In November, the regulations unit became fully staffed. Those positions were new in July, so it just became fully staffed in November. And all of the programs have now been assigned a regulations attorney, and I think Ms. Harbaugh is in the office for your board. A large priority for the regulation unit has actually been working on AB 2138, because as all of you know, we need to get that implemented in order to meet the goal of the July deadline that they have. And so we've been working a lot on that and tracking that. But another thing we're doing just to really improve transparency in the regulation unit is putting together a database called Sharewell, where the clients and the boards and bureaus will be able to go in and see the status of those regulations and kind of know where their documents are. And it also is a flowing process where it goes in and out. So a person gets it electronically, they'll make the edits, it'll go back to the next reviewer. So all of that are things that are being worked on, and hopefully that will as well improve those timeframes that you're looking at. As far as the fiscal reports, I'm actually happy to report that the Budget Office and the Office of Information Services are in the testing phase of a project that's going to allow programs access to the budget expenditure reports, similar to what it used to be under the CalSTARS reports. So they're actually taking the data from the fiscal system and putting it into called a Cognos database that we use now with Qbert for Breeze reports. And so we're going to be able to get that information to where it looks similar to what it used to look like in the past. It's kind of making that transition. The plan is to release the new expenditure reports in early of this year, and that would be for the 19-20 fiscal year. And eventually, these reports are going to be able to be run on an on demand by the executive officers. So I know this is a sunset year for this board, and I just wanted to let you know that we're willing to help in whatever manner that you need us to help. We're going to be setting up meetings with agency and the boards to go over any issues that you might have, and again, just offer our help, including if you want to have a mock hearing with your membership. If Dr. Nolan, if you want to come and we can sit down and grill you like you'll be grilled in front of the legislature, we're happy to do that, and it just kind of gets you a little bit ready for that hearing when it comes up. And I know we don't have those dates yet or the issues that you'll be expected to report on, but any help we can provide, we're here to help you.
Great.
And then we've also identified training dates for the board member orientation for any of you that may need that training. So that has to be done for anybody that is new to the board within the first year and any reappointment as well. So we're holding our first one here in Sacramento, March 25th of 2020. And then we'll also be looking at doing one in the LA area in June and then back here in Sacramento in October. And I know the last one that we did down south was in Riverside, and a lot of LA members said, Riverside it's not conducive to getting there, and so we're going to look more to LA Central for that training. It's also important that you know your Form 700s are going to be due on April 1st. Each of the boards under the conflict of interest regulations are designated appointees, and therefore you have to provide those and get those statement of economic interests done. And remember, you have to report, even if you don't have anything to report, you still have to file. And you can look to our Office of Human Resources if they need to help you with the electronic filing. And then if you have any questions as far as the filing requirements themselves, you can always reach out to our Legal Affairs unit and they will help you. And then the last thing is something I believe that your executive officer has already taken advantage of, but that is our department's Organizational Improvement Office. And the reason I'm bringing this out to the boards, a lot of boards aren't aware and haven't utilized this. I know at the medical board, if I have one regret, it's that I didn't have them come out and look at some of the services within our program there. And so that's a unit that actually can come in and they do change management services, business process mapping, and information technology system requirement documentation. So they have just completed a report on the Legal Affairs Department. So we also are having them come in and looking at DCA's centralized services. So they've already completed a report on the Legal Affairs Division and now the Division of Investigation, one that's in the final processes. But we also have them looking at the Office of Information Services, their help desk, as well as moving now into, they just started the initiation phase into our Office of Human Resources and looking at classification and recruitment. And that's really the hiring process for DCA, and to try to really find efficiencies and streamline those processes. And then the last thing they're working with is 9 boards and bureaus to document and analyze their process of their business analytics. And that's really so they can develop future IT systems. And so those are all of my updates that I have. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present to the board. I would like to thank you again for just your service and your leadership on the board. I know that this is not when I was at the medical board, it was definitely a volunteer position with your $100 per day. It doesn't pay for all of the sometimes headaches that you have to deal with and the last minute needs that you have. So just again, thank you for your service of being on the board. And with that, I would be open to answering any questions you may have.
Well, I want to thank you for coming. Personally, we feel rather honored, and we actually are very excited that someone with your background and your experiences are in this position. I think that's great. I will say we sink or swim together, and so we feel like we're a part of your team. And also, we all share the common goal of consumer protection, and I think none of us would be on this board if we didn't feel very passionate about that. Having said that, though, I would say we need help. We need your help. We have different expenses that we have no control over that have been making our board find it very difficult to, as you know, make ends meet. I'm sure very well of the status of the emergency fee increase, which we all feel really horrible about. But we just need your help in helping us to, not only for us to be more efficient, we know we have room to grow there and improve, but we think there's probably other issues that you could help us address to make it a more streamlined and cost-effective program. So thank you very much for being here. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Mark.
Now that you've been on the job, we can be a little harder on you. No, I'm just kidding. We've had to go through a very painful fee increase. The budget office came before us last meeting and tried to put some of the blame on us eliminating the RVT examination, but a vast majority of our budget issues are related to the AG's office, with 70% fee increase for the clerks and 30% fee increase for the lawyers in that department. A very good point was made that in the whole disciplinary process, there's only so much money we can recover in cost for various reasons. So all of that increase is going to be borne by this board. And to me, it's almost like global warming. We're ignoring this issue that in the long term, it's going to prove unsustainable, and we're not going to be able to survive unless something's done about the AG's office. And they're not going to listen to us. Hopefully, they're going to listen to the Department of Consumer Affairs. But I really would like to emphasize that we definitely need help in that department.
Okay. And help from the perspective of the fees, because as far as the fees.
Well, maybe the fees, but as you had mentioned, just improving the whole process, streamlining it. We've had some discussion on how we can streamline the process from beginning to end to maybe not make all those cases go to the level of disciplinary hearings and so forth. That can be part of the solution, but we rely on DCA, and now that we have somebody that understands us, hopefully we can get more support with our efforts.
So it is something that I'm going to be looking at. There's even just been differences between, there's two sides of the Attorney General's office. There's the health quality enforcement section, and then there's a licensing section. Even looking at differences in the way they process, that's something I want to look at, and just comparatively look at that and talk to the senior assistant attorney generals for each of those sides and try to see where we can streamline some of the processes and some of the requirements of the evidence that's needed to go over. So that's something definitely that I want to look at, which eventually will streamline that process. I think, just it's not going to change drastically because you have due process for your licensees.
And we have more complaints than ever before.
And you have more complaints, right? So as everything goes up for your fees, and again, your fee increases are not just solely because of the Attorney General's office. It's really been hit by a lot, if you think about it, over the last several years. And remember, if you look back to, prior two administrations ago, it was a time of, you had furloughs, you had a lot of cuts, you had a lot of things that impacted your budget to the negative, so you actually were able to either build up your fund a little bit, or you definitely weren't upside down in your revenue expenditures versus your revenue that's coming in, and your expenditures versus your revenue. And so that now, we're no longer in that world anymore. We've had employee compensation that has impacted, and it doesn't just impact your board. It impacts everybody that provides a service for you.
Yeah.
And so that employee compensation, the workman's compensation, those increases, all of those things really just cause what you're running into now with fee increases. And you're not alone in this, and I don't think it's anything that's going to change. We can provide, efficiencies, and all of us can find efficiencies, but at the end of the day, we're gonna have to pay for the expenditures of what's happening and what the services are that you're getting. So I think with the AG's office, I think there is some avenue, that we can look at to try to find efficiencies, but because of that due process, you're always gonna have that work with them. And, obviously, I don't know what your settlement rate is, but, settling cases out without going to hearing is always a benefit, and maybe looking at earlier settlement conferences, because then you don't get to the point where you've really, prepared for the hearing. Usually, a lot of times settlements will happen 2 days before the hearing, and you've paid a lot of money to get, those hearings, all your evidence and everything together. So earlier settlement conferences is something, that I think we could talk to the AG's office about.
And the whole budget process has always been frustrating to me in regards to, we don't have the staff to do what we need to do. And then it goes back to, well, we need to have a budget change proposal to get the staff. And in order to have a budget change proposal, you have to prove something or another. That second bullet point you made about the fiscal changes that you're going to make, that kind of went over my head.
Okay.
But will that help out with what we need to do to get the budget, to have the staff we need to have?
It will not. So the fiscal reports are just the reports that you, by month, will be able to identify what you're spending. Right now, you're not getting those monthly reports. You're getting like a projection. We project that this is how much you're going to spend on communications or on printing. What we want is to be able to actually show the boards, this is what you're spending and this is how you were spending it under those items. So you can kind of take a better look at your budget, but at the end of the day, it's not going to change the budget process. That's legislatively, you have to go through the budget change process. That's how the only way within the state you can get those augmentations to your budget. That's just a normal system and process that's used across, it's not just DCA, it's across the entire state. It's the way they have to go through that process.
And I just want to clarify too, when you budget change proposals, those change allocated items in your budget, but not in the fund. So you can get approved for positions, but if you don't have money to pay for those positions, then it doesn't help us. So it really stems back to what's in the fund.
Right, yeah, basically in your savings account. That's what drives all of your positions and anything that you can spend. Which is why you're going through the fee increase. And I know those are never easy, and I think a lot of individuals, the medical board right now is going through the same thing, Dr. Nunez. They're meeting today too to discuss a large fee increase that will hit them drastically, and it's basically everything that I said, same things happen with them. And I think, we've gone a long time, so for the medical board, we haven't had a fee increase since 2006. And so now it's just, and they have a little bit different requirements. Their fund can only be between 2 and 4 months, which is very small and very hard to deal with. So they're a little bit of an anomaly, but I can tell you it's been a long time. Even the AG's office, they hadn't had a fee increase for 10 years, which I think is why you saw it so drastic in some of those areas.
Thank you for coming again. I do want to go back to the AG's office just because I feel a little bit like we're just at the mercy of whatever they want to do, not just with the fees, but in some of the cases that we've seen, one of the AGs will leave the case and another one will come on and have to start over, and we're getting charged for all of that. And it doesn't seem like we have any recourse, whereas if we were in the public and we hired an attorney, we could, have some recourse. as well as the paralegal fees, which was brought up to us, is basically the cost of a lot of attorneys. And if a defendant is placed with those fees, their attorney can argue that that's undue penalty because that's not even a fair price. And so it sounds like we're just supposed to say, well, that's just the way it is. Is that true? Do we just have to throw our hands up and be like, the AGs get to do whatever they want, and if they're inefficient, well, nobody has to answer for that?
It's actually not. And
Okay.
you can go through, it's not as easy, but there is a process. You can go through your Attorney General billing and look at your billing, and if you have questions or concerns with it, you can bring those up to the Senior Assistant Attorney General, who will look at those charges and see if they were warranted. For the medical board, we call them SAG, that's the SAG, that individual actually has come back to us and said, I went and looked at this. I believe that the individual who looked at this took too many hours for the review, and I've decreased your billing on this case. We've actually had that happen. So there is the opportunity for you to go and look at those billings. Ms. Sieferman, you probably are already doing that.
We are, and I think I reported it probably 6 months ago. We did get a big chunk of money back on one of our cases, and so it does happen. I wouldn't say it's really common, but that's something that we are definitely looking closely at and need to utilize it more.
And just with the paralegal fees, is that just, we just have to accept that they have a unusually high paralegal fee thing, or is there some process to go have that reviewed, or?
So they did go through the review process. That went through the Department of Finance, and those are the fees that will be going forward for the future.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you again for coming. Just a couple of questions, and I know we're talking about the AG's office, but we also have to be cognizant that another big element is the investigatory portion of our complaint, and the Department of, that is also a big chunk of money, and I think we're seeing some savings in the way the staff is handling investigations now, which is using our own inspectors at a different cost price point. So that being said, it's not just the AG's office. There's other outside forces that also have changed a lot and are very expensive. I did have a couple of questions. On the Sharewell, sort of the reg real-time status, when do you expect that to be launched?
We're hoping within the next couple of months.
Great.
So we've
Okay.
actually already used it in a test pilot phase. So we're in the final process of that user acceptance testing for the individuals.
Okay, great. And I was really happy to hear about the Fiscal fix, I guess, because that's a tool that has been lacking, and it's for management, staff management and budget management. It's huge. You said it's going to start soon. Does that mean like first quarter, sometime before?
I would say probably March, April is what we're looking at for a rollout date of that. I actually went to a meeting last week and saw the initial phase, and so I've seen that they are now able to pull the information from that Fiscal and provide a report that it looks just like it would have been as a monthly accounting of where you are in each line
Great.
item. So I've seen the testing phase of it.
Great. I'm sure that's going to be critical to all the boards. Lastly, I didn't hear the name of the unit you talked about, which is one of your services that goes in and it looks for efficiencies, practices, best practices, management, and you said we're already using part of that Jessica's already using part of that. Is that something, and I was going to just ask Jessica, is that something that you're utilizing across the board in terms of management, business practices, things like that, that might also help us with efficiencies?
Yeah, when I first came in, that's one of the things I did was meet with the OIO team, they were previously called OCM, to try to start mapping our processes and identify efficiencies. Unfortunately, due to the resources, we weren't able to do the initial chunk that we wanted, but they're now able, they just reached out to us recently. Actually, Brian Clifford is in the room. He reached out to us to start looking at inspections, but we will be using that for the whole process.
Great, thank you.
I think it was called the Organizational Improvement Office.
Yes.
And that was Change Management Services. Can I use that on my own personal life?
I know, I wish I could. After I was watching what they went through, I'm like, oh man, I could really use this in a lot of areas.
The last thing I would like to say is we are super honored and super grateful and thankful that the head of the DCA is here to give us the DCA report. And just as you are going to support us too in our sunset process, we support you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that too. We are a team. We are one.
Thank you, thank you. I need to open it up for public comment at this stage. You have to come to the mic. Yeah, please come to the mic. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, I'm Dr. Al Aldretti, a veterinarian. And to you, Director, I heard everything that you said was really interesting for the board, but I heard nothing that you said that's going to help the consumers. The licensing right now, they're understaffed with licensing. They can hire people. There's so many steps going on the regulations. People are waiting up to 5 to 7 months to get their license processed. That is really unacceptable. And I think the Bureau has a responsibility to consumers. Your name is Consumer Protection Agency. And right now, all I heard was Consumer Protection Agency for the boards and for the Bureau, but nothing for the consumer.
I'll let you, but I was just going to clarify, a lot of the services that DCA provides actually does help the consumer in a way when we talk about staffing, for example, that all of the staff, in order to hire staff, that's all done through DCA, mostly when we go through HR. And so when she had talked about improvements in HR and how long it takes to hire someone in the entire process, that if we can shorten it and streamline that will help us immensely be able to fill vacancies. So right now, we had 8 vacancies, we just filled 2, but there's a lot of things outside of our control that is causing us delays in filling these vacancies. And so when the director comes or anyone from DCA comes and says what they're doing to improve services for us, that will definitely help give us faster processing timelines because we'll have more staff quicker. So everything that DCA does to support us is absolutely helping the consumer.
And just a couple other things too. I believe that we actually have staff that we have provided to the Veterinary Medical Board from our Consumer Information Center, who has actually come over and they're now working at VetMed to help them during this time until they get those services. So that's something else we do. And then even for the licensing process, if there's something we need to sit down with Ms. Sieferman and the board to go through and say, okay, is there something we can look at the licensing process to speed up that process? That's also something we're willing to do. So when I'm talking about the changes that we're making, all of those are going to go back to help the board in what they're meeting their mission of consumer protection. So it's definitely about the consumer as well when we're looking at everything that we do.
Yeah.
Christina.
Sorry, just on that note, and the comment that Dr. Pasco made about the phone calls and emails, and that I think in our strategic planning, we identified that as a really big problem, and we're looking at ways to improve that. I'm concerned that, you know, the way that things go might take a long time to implement changes like phone tree changes and things like that. I'm hoping that maybe you guys can help with that and even help farm out some of the callbacks or the email. I don't even know what that would mean, but rather than wait until we have a long-term plan in place, maybe a temporary plan to help with that while we figure out a better long-term solution, I think would be really helpful.
And the phone tree is something that would be under, I'm assuming yours is under the DCA.
Yep.
So to get that changed, that's a great idea. It's something we can take back and help expedite that process as soon as you get the scripts written up.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, any comment from the board? Looks like we're good. Moving on to agenda item number 6 for the discussion and possible action from the Multidisciplinary Action Committee, we invite Dr. Pollard forward.
Morning. Jeff Pollard, MDC. So we had another colorful meeting. We reached some consensus on the first item that was titled Legislative and Regulatory Proposals Regarding Corporate Practice of Veterinary Medicine. The subcommittee, Christy Pulowski and Stuart Ekman, did a fabulous job. We put together a memo. It itemized the bullet points. They came up with 18 based on responses from DVM's, their survey back in the spring, the vet students that testified at the last meeting. There was surprisingly very little discussion about those, a few questions, but we elected to proceed directly to the language. And the proposed legislation is for regulations, and a couple of them are new additions and a couple are just language changes. And I don't know how valuable it would be to go through those things because that was pretty hashed through yesterday, and you're going to get the language that we voted on and then weigh in at that point. But I thought the process was aided immensely by public comment. There was a corporate presence. VCA came with 3 medical directors of hospitals, and they all testified, and it was a very valuable exercise for the committee, and I think additionally for them. That was probably the majority of the discussion, along with the language. The language was tweaked again thanks to Tara Welch sacrificing her lunch and going through the fine details to come up with something that we could vote on in the afternoon. We voted to accept this language unanimously, so that'll go to you, and we'll be interested to see how you feel about it. I'll stop for any questions about that topic first before moving on.
Cheryl?
There were quite a few changes, and so I was wondering if we could actually see the final form before our packets that would come in April. Can we get that sooner than that?
Yeah, I can send that
Okay.
out to you guys.
Okay. Mark?
I'm always so thankful that all the discussion takes place at the MDC and not here at the board, because I commend you. They really do go through line by line the language to make sure that it's right, to make sure that it's consistent with other section in regulations and statutes and so forth, and also to consider greatly the long-term consequences of language. So good job on that. There were two big areas of discussion, though, that I'd like your thoughts on. And one was on the application for a premise permit by a corporation. There was a long discussion on, do we really need the names of all the shareholders of a corporation? And on that point, the thing that I think of is if a veterinarian applies for a premise permit, then there are certain things that the board does, due diligence to check their license and their fingerprints and all that and make sure that it's appropriate. I don't see this board doing fingerprinting on every shareholder of a large corporation. So I personally don't see the added value in having the names of all the shareholders in a premise permit application. And the second area that had a lot of discussion was on limitation, on compensation. How does that exercise control over professional judgment of an employee?
I'll take those in reverse order because I was closer to the compensation discussion, and then I'm going to defer to Tara on your first point about the shareholder listing. The compensation element of the language will mostly be dealt with on, it was 4883T, as in Tom, an added item. And we did, as you witnessed and mentioned, laboriously go over words and the, I don't think I have the agreed upon language because I have just the packet. So I'm not going to read it at the risk of being wrong, but just address the word compensation. We had a long discussion and back and forth with the VCA people and concluded that there's a distinction in the disciplinary event related to compensation between salary versus punitive. People get hired, they do a job, they get paid for that job, and it isn't necessarily transparent to the outsider who isn't privy to. I'll give an example. The attorney Mark Cushing's indicated there was an example of a employee who was tasked with doing a spay and was proposed with, if you can do this spay in less than 15 minutes, I'll give you $150. And there's lots of ways to structure someone's salary. I don't think it's in the VMB's purview to get into the meat and potatoes of how they pay people, and I don't think we want to. It's just an onerous thing and kind of out of our league. But if that person, let's say, didn't reach that goal, didn't finish the procedure in the allotted time, didn't get the bonus, if that's what you want to call it, we talked about, well, is that a punitive measure? Is that something that they should be, do they have a grievance about that? And, everybody has an opinion. I think we concluded that we didn't want to have the VMB acting on how people are paid. He indicated a surgeon who does 10 procedures a month gets paid less than a surgeon who does 40 procedures a month, is another example. So, what they earn for that is that's not our business, I don't believe.
Sure. Can we have Tara read the final language, just regarding compensation?
Before that happens, is this something that we should do next meeting where we have it agendized and we can actually have a maybe educated discussion? I think some of the board members don't know what you're talking about because they missed the NDC meeting. So it might be better if we table this till we actually have.
I like that.
Would that be all right? Okay.
Well, my question was not necessary to change the language. I just wanted the MDC chair to make comments on those discussions, on what was discussed.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a hard time hearing the question in your question. So can you reiterate the question
I just
part?
wanted him to expand upon the discussion that was had on those two specific issues.
Okay. Did he answer that for you?
Answer the first one, or the second one.
Okay.
I can answer the second one. So concern was raised as to whether or not a large corporation should have to report the names of all shareholders of the corporation on their premises registration application. During lunch, I went back to the office and revised the text to only require veterinary corporations to report shareholders on their application pursuant to the requirements under Moscone-Knox. And then carved out a separate requirement for all other corporations that are not a veterinary corporation. And they would only have to report on their premises registration application all owners, corporate officers, general partners, and agents for service of process. No shareholders, so I think we resolved that issue.
Good. Any other questions? Comments? Comments from the public? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you done, Dr. Pollard, or do you want to go in item by item?
No, with that agenda item, yes. I'm done, but
Okay, well,
I'm not done.
do you want me to break up your presentation, or do you want to finish it before we have?
I think it'll
Okay.
make it more concise for the discussion if we go if
Great.
we go item by item.
Valerie Fenstermaker, CVMA, and I was at the meeting yesterday, and it was an excellent meeting with great input from the stakeholders on a really important issue. My question is the timeline. I totally appreciate that this will be discussed at the next meeting, and anybody that has spare time, if you want to watch that webcast, it would be really, really helpful, or at least parts of it. This issue is raised in your sunset report, so I just am wondering, at the next meeting, if you were to approve this language, would you try and roll it into your sunset legislation? The hearing, at least from my understanding, the first hearing will probably be around March. So how does that timeline work? And if you could help us with that, we'd appreciate it.
So I think during the board's last teleconference, they had talked about whether or not they want to have the sunset legislation include this issue, and they decided not to include it. We wanted to raise it to let the legislature know that this, this is something that is happening with the board. This is an issue that we are facing, but not something that they want to specifically put into the sunset bill itself. Is that from the people who are participating? So with that, it will most likely be for next session, not this session.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, Dr. Pollard, feel free to present.
Our second agenda item was a discussion about the closed case audit subcommittee, and we had a conference, Jessica and I, last month, and due to several board questions over recent meetings, I believe Dr. Nunez, Kathleen Bowler had inquired as to the status of it because we hadn't given a report in a while. So we put it on the agenda to get committee input and audience input. Like a lot of topics at the MDC, I thought it was going to be quick and simple, and it was not. There was a good discussion about what the original task was, what the goals were, and all of the items that were discussed. Actually, when I went back last night writing this report, I pulled up first an email from John Klingborg, previous chair, who was in the position when the task was assigned to us in August of 15. And then the other, I think, telling item was a note from Candace Rainey, the enforcement officer at the time, manager at the time. And the topics that were mentioned with regard to the goals, they involved, I'll read just a couple of lines that I think synthesize them best. The purpose of this comes from September 18th, 2015 memo from Candace Rainey, where she summarized a teleconference Dr. Bill Grant, myself, and Executive Officer Del Monayo had, along with Candace. The purpose of the subcommittee's review of closed cases is to determine how the standard of care has been applied in prior board disciplinary actions and whether the expert opinions are generally supported as the standard of care. Also, identify areas of opportunity for improvement in both the actual process of disciplinary cases as well as provide greater consistency with regard to the application of the standard of care. So standard of care comes up a lot. There was, I had to review this to remember precisely the case selection process. The first times that we sat down, there was a selection of cases based on first common case review that included cases with disagreement among VMB consultants and experts. So the consultants are the Veterinary Medical Board consultants at the board and the expert witnesses. Cases that are more factually complex, many of these were very involved cases, and cases that had been closed within the past 3 years. And at that time, in 2015, I think the oldest case I remember seeing was a 2007 case. So, that was a long, long time ago then even. And then there was a random case review where more generic cases were picked for a more random sampling. I wasn't privy, nor should I have been, to that process. We just would meet in the conference room, and Candace Rainey would bring in a stack of folders, and we'd spend the day reviewing them. That process continued until, after Bill Grant termed off in 2018, and the last time that review was done physically was with Dr. Lazarchev and myself in December of 2018. In the interim, we've done other things related, particularly to the expert witnesses, which brings me to the other goals, if you will, of the original task, was to evaluate the expert witness writing and make sure they adhere to the standard of care. And in the process of the 4.5 years that Dr. Grant and I were involved, we attended, both of us, 2 expert witness training sessions. One, I recall, was in San Diego, and one was in Sacramento, and met many of the experts. And in the interim then, about a few months ago, Dr. Lazarchev and I and Rob Stephanopoulos, the current enforcement manager, and Jessica got together to come up with a model expert witness opinion that's now being used in training, I understand. So I think the subcommittee's task has kind of morphed, and I don't know exactly where we're going, and we left it yesterday that Dr. Lazarchev and I and Jessica would get together and see what the MDC can continue to provide input for to help the process.
Great, thank you. Questions? Questions from the public? Sorry, Mark, I didn't see that. Mark.
You may have questions on where this committee is going, but I have great expectations for this committee, because it's interesting reading that memo from Candace from 5 years ago, summarizing the purpose of the committee to evaluate the entire complaint process. Our executive officer made an excellent point during the meeting yesterday of how we really should be evaluating the whole complaint process from start to finish, with the intention of finding out if the standard of care is being applied to all these complaints. She further went on to say that the Complaint Audit Committee has focused a little bit too much on the expert witness training, and not on the whole process. When we look at our strategic plan, there are plenty of goals that we've set for ourselves to try to evaluate the process from start to finish, reviewing how we utilize citations, perhaps using them more before things get elevated to this long process of hearings and so forth. And then when we listened to the presentation from the head of the DCA, she also said that she wanted to help evaluate the whole complaint process to streamline things, to ensure that the standard of care is being applied to these processes versus getting way tied up with the legalities of what's written in the Practice Act, which is something that attorneys love to tie the whole process up with. So that's where I see this committee heading, is to help evaluate the whole process from start to finish.
2 comments about that. One, one change I've noted in the expert witness writing today compared to 5 years ago is expert witnesses previously were tasked with citing a VPA regulation. They'd find and establish a complaint and cite 2032 anesthesia or whatever. That is not the case anymore, as I understand it. And I think that's a good thing, because that was a very difficult part for a veterinarian. I mean, the reality is, nobody goes home at night and reads the Practice Act for bedtime enjoyment or anything else, except when they have to reference something. And so, it's organized in such a way that this part deals with X. So that part is now tasked to the DAG, which it should be. The DAG doesn't know the medicine part, so the veterinarian, the expert witness, is tasked with explaining this is what happened, this is what it means, and the DAG says this is the law that was broken or the regulation that was violated. So that, I think, is an improvement. I know there was a second, forgive me, I can't remember what it was.
I dare say that Bonnie Lutz takes the Practice Act to bed and reads it before she falls asleep, yes.
That's a good segue. I want to add one other comment. Bonnie Lutz came to the table to testify, and I asked her a question, and I think it was what she was to testify for. She can speak to it. But she tellingly stated that she hasn't seen an improvement in the expert witness writing, and Jessica confirmed this with more detail. And that was a little disheartening, because it seems like we put a lot of work into this. And I just counted up here the number of times we met. It was over a dozen times. Say nothing about phone calls and homework.
Yeah, I agree. They both hurt my feelings a little bit when they said that, but I think we've made some progress.
That was not our intent.
Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's kind of disappointing, given the vast improvement in the expert witness trainings in the last 5 years since I've been on. I think the staff and everyone has done a really great job of creating good trainings for expert witnesses, so I was hoping there was a difference in the final product. And maybe this is par for the course in terms of human beings.
Well, and while we do acknowledge that it hasn't been getting better since this committee was started 5 years ago, I think the direction that we're heading is a good direction with this committee. And my goal is to really come up with some measurable items to measure the improvement of it, because it can't go another 5 years without improvement. So I'm really excited to work with this committee to get that going.
Cheryl, so what can we do for outreach to try and get more expert witnesses?
You mean better?
That's what I was getting at, was trying not to say it.
Or make the ones we have, give them opportunity to improve.
I think we want to do both. We need to do more recruitment, and then also, we can do a lot of recruitment, but coming from the board, it doesn't work as effectively as word of mouth from our members, from the association, to explain why it's a good thing for them to do. But we definitely will send out some recruitment notifications within the next month. It's already something that we have been planning on doing. We just wanted to first fix the guidelines and information and the training that we're doing, and then recruit more with the new process.
And to wrap this up, since the MDC needs directions from the board, I would encourage the MDC to review that memo from 2015, take a look at our strategic plan, review what our executive officer said yesterday, and what the DCA had, the director said as well today. I'd like this committee to focus on the whole process from start to finish, and especially how does the standard of care can be better applied to these complaint processes.
Christina.
So this may be just a small point, but I'm just wondering, in that whole process, when the complaints are being sent to an expert witness, are we looking at like how that expert witness is being chosen? Because sometimes I'm seeing in some of these cases where, you know, it's somebody who's working with lab animals that's actually reporting on a small animal case, and I don't know if that's just because that's the only person, or is that because it just is getting sent out randomly to small animal veterinarians? So is that part of the thing you're looking at?
That was discussed yesterday, actually. That's a good segue. Bonnie Lutz mentioned helpfully that there is a qualification process in the medical world. Ours, technically there is, but it's a pretty low bar with regard to what is required, A, to be an expert witness, and just FYI, it's 5 years of experience, a license that doesn't have any discipline, and I think that's it. The experts, as far as being qualified to write a report and testify to a case, at the moment, we, as a board, are depending on them to make that judgment. And technically, they're supposed to. When they receive the case, they're supposed to read it, and if they deem themselves not qualified, they have every right and frankly responsibility to send it back to the analyst and say, not my gig. And I suspect that doesn't always happen.
Well, I think sometimes people don't know what they don't know, so they may not even realize they're not qualified, you know? So perhaps that's something we can look at is, you know, creating a list for the enforcement people to send the cases to people who have similar experience to what's happening. But I don't know that the veterinarians, if they've had experiences spaying animals, they may not realize that that is going to be if they mostly are not spaying dogs and cats but are in the lab, they may not realize that that's not going to be a great witness in an administrative hearing. So I don't know if that's something we can look at and how the cases are sent out.
Yeah. I believe Bonnie mentioned a list of questions that are used commonly to establish the expertise of your expert witness, and I think that would be very helpful if we actually take a look at that and somehow incorporate that.
Yeah, and that is something that we're also looking into, because it's important, I think, that if we have a case involving a specialist, we have an equally qualified person testifying about the standard of care. I think that that's something that we've been definitely looking at and improving, and also put more information on the application itself to let us know the experience that they have, and then to properly match that experience to the type of case it is.
Don't they provide a CV or resume?
I don't believe so.
Oh. Any other questions for Dr. Pollard? Anything else, Dr. Pollard?
Not about this. Want to go
Okay.
to the next item?
Any more public comment?
Okay, Bonnie Lutz. I just wanted to clarify that I didn't mean to say that the reports had not improved. My comments yesterday were directed to the fact that, and I think that what you're talking about right now is exactly the solution, which is to look more closely at whether the individual expert is actually qualified to opine on that specific case. The reports are very good. It's just the actual experts that are chosen. There's another example where now in law, you can have a specialist testify regarding a generalist, and that's, you can do that. The problem gets to be that once those specialists get on the stand, they opine, veterinarians are not, they're not like MDs who, a lot of them make a whole living out of being expert witnesses. So when they get on the stand, if they're asked a certain question, they don't really understand that they're supposed to be opining regarding the standard of care of the generalist rather than their standard of care. And there is a case that we had a couple of years ago regarding dental x-rays. And that was a case where you had a specialist who was on the stand, a very well-known dental specialist, and when he was asked whether dental radiographs were standard of care, he said yes. I mean, that was really unfortunate because he really should have been testifying regarding a generalist. Instead, he was testifying regarding a specialist. So that's just another good example of the fact that I didn't mean to say the reports weren't good, but that I really think, even from my perspective of a defense attorney, I'd be happier to be dealing with somebody on the other side who I can, actually talk to, or who I really believe can opine in that case. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Paul.
Last item is future agenda items, and we had a couple. First one is, at the April meeting, the committee will vote on a new MDC chair because I will term out in June. Second item was brought up by Dr. Sullivan, and he wanted to raise the tiered premise permit fee in the context especially of the recent RVT license fee increase. And the third item, we discussed the meeting dates and locations. The next meeting is being discussed to be at Fresno, and my humble apologies to Dr. Waterhouse. Last night I checked, and there is a direct flight from San Diego to Fresno for $69. So I'm happy to go to Fresno.
If that's where we go.
Though I will bring up that the public was not quite so thrilled.
That's all I have for DC report.
Any more questions? Yes, Kathy.
I just, back to the expert witness sort of protocols and maybe questions and things like that, is that something that we could ask the MDC to work on as far as a system, a set of questions, some standards in terms of expert witness recruitment and then assignments?
So I think that's,
Or is that not?
I think that's what the committee is going to be focusing on. So all of the stuff that's being brought up is all stuff that when Dr. Pollard and Dr. Lazarev and I meet, those are all things that we'll be looking at.
Great, because my point is, I just didn't want it to stop here. I wanted to
I won't let it stop here.
move forward. Okay.
Would you prefer to have a member of the VMB on that committee? You have two MDC members and the EO.
I think it's helpful to have a board member on to a point. My concern is if we get case-specific items, it's hard for you guys. You guys can't be evaluating that or be a part of that. I think that the setup that we have now works because they are MDC members who are not board members, and Dr. Pollard comes and gives the report to the board, and so if the board has any feedback they'd like to provide, that's when it would happen.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments or questions? Any comments from the public? Okay, anything else? No. Okay, thank you very much. I would echo the board members' comments of how well the meeting went yesterday and how proud we are of the work that you're doing, and thank you very much for doing an excellent job with that. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, a report on the current statutory framework regarding rodeos.
Actually, with Dr. Pollard here, do you want to take item 8 to speak about the cannabis?
I'm sorry, yes, we can jump up to item 8 if you'd like.
Okay, so agenda item 8 is an update for the guidelines for veterinarian discussion of cannabis within the veterinary client-patient relationship. As you recall, this was a directive from the legislature through AB 2215. The board had approved the guidelines at the October meeting, and they were posted shortly thereafter. So they were actually posted before the deadline, so we were early on that. So after we did post the guidelines, we received some stakeholder concerns from the industrial hemp industry, and they specifically requested that the board remove the following words from the last sentence in the guidelines, which is attachment 1 in your packet. It says, and they want to strike, and should only do so after the industrial hemp product has been approved by the FDA for use in animals. We had added this for clarification purposes at the request of CVMA. And we aren't, we did modify the guidelines for consideration for the members. It still makes it clear what the laws are, I believe, regarding the FDA. It just basically moves it down to where we're talking about, and when we're talking about industrial hemp, it's in the second paragraph talking about really the safety of it, specifically to industrial hemp. So the changes in your packets and projected, we're proposing striking from the first paragraph. Further, the Federal Food and Drug Administration has not approved the use of industrial hemp products for treatment in animals. But we do, and then we also strike, in addition, a veterinarian who manufactures, markets, or sells drugs not approved by the FDA is in violation of federal law. And then we strike, and should only do so after the industrial hemp product has been approved by the FDA for use in animals. However, we're adding to make sure that the clarification is still there for veterinarians. Further, any industrial hemp product intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of a disease or intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of an animal is a drug. We felt it was important to put that definition in there. And then also, that's where we put, there are no FDA-approved drugs containing industrial hemp for use in animals. A veterinarian who manufactures, markets, or sells drugs not approved by the FDA is in violation of federal law. So when we had these changes, we did have a teleconference with Dr. Pollard as well, because it was important to us, since Dr. Pollard was one of the main people who did all the work with this, that he was on board with these proposals. And so with that, Dr. Pollard, if you could give your viewpoint of this proposal.
I want to add, before I jump directly to that first, as you know, the board posted the guidelines on Friday, November 15th. So a full month and a half before they were due, which was admirable, and I suspect there might have been some acceleration in that work behind the scenes, and I applaud Jessica, and I'm sure Tara was involved to get it done at that point, because coincidentally, Dr. Nolan, Jessica, Hospital Inspector Jim Howard, and myself attended and presented at a Southern California SCBMA meeting on cannabis Sunday, 2 days after that, on the 17th. And it was, I thought, a wonderful CE meeting. I was going to go whether I was involved or not, and it was in 4 parts. There were presentations by 2 cannabis experts, Dr. Robert Silver, who was also one of the sponsors, and Stephen Sattel, RVT, with a company named Elvet, also one of the sponsors. The 3rd presenter was the VMB, and the 4th presenter was Bonnie Lutz, who gave an outstanding presentation, informative. And at the end of the session, there was a Q&A, a roundtable, where everybody came to the front, and there was a tremendous amount of interaction. And I can't tell you how many people, excuse me, came to, at least Jessica and I, who were sitting together, and said, "Thank you for coming. This gives us a view of the VMB as a, real live person." I think they like that. It was the biggest room in attendance-wise, and I've been going to these meetings for years, that I've ever seen. So, there clearly is tremendous interest among licensees to get this information. Say nothing about everybody else. So I don't know if that precipitated this input that prompted us to change this language. I don't consider this a substantive change. It's also notable, as is mentioned in the memo, that the board wasn't tasked with addressing industrial hemp at all. AB 2215 was about cannabis. Farm bill changes, you all saw the movie, and things happened the way they happened, and I suspect this is going to be old news 3 months from now. And Oh, thank you. In the current subcommittee, this current subcommittee happens to be me and Meg Warner are operating under the presumption that current legislation, SB 627, will likely pass, and we'll modify these guidelines to address that. There's other legislation, but I don't think it applies to what we're discussing with regard to these changes. And so I initially had some concerns to the teleconference that Jessica referred to about the readability of this. And Tara pointed out, this is the law. Nobody can read the law except for attorneys. So I would, as a bit of a segue, just say that obviously for committee purposes, I've kept up on reading research and reading lay material, material that's made for veterinarians that isn't research. And there have been a couple of, I think, very good synopses of the state of the cannabis scene. And I would encourage anybody, just like, and I'm just going to name them because I think they were valuable. One was just a couple of days ago in a journal called Today's Veterinary Practice, the January-February 2020 issue, where Gary Richter, who you may recall testified in front of the board a year ago in January at the Davis meeting. He wrote an article, Current State of Cannabis Research in Veterinary Medicine. And last month, there was a very good article in DVM 360, written by Carla Johnson, 12/18/2019. CBD, forget the legal issues, does it work in veterinary patients? I think it's important for veterinarians to, for obvious license requirement reasons, keep up with what the VMB puts on the website and how they understand it to be enforced. But because this is such a dynamic process, it's important if you are going to use or discuss this to keep up, or say that you're not going to discuss this. So after our teleconference, I concluded that these changes correspond with federal law. I think we are under the umbrella of the FDA, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, California Public Health Department, and I'm sure we're not going as fast as some would like, but I think we're going, and I think we're going in the right direction. So I would encourage you to adopt these modifications.
Thank you. Questions? Kathy?
As a public member, I was wondering, Dr. Pollard, could you, those two publications you just referenced, the veterinary publications, is it possible to get us those links or copies? I'd love to read those. And also the conference you guys were speaking about in Southern California, was that filmed? Is that possible to watch?
No, I thought about that at the time, and
okay.
They generally are not. It
Yeah.
would have been really very valuable because, I'm sure Dr. Nolan and Jessica have other things to do on a Sunday. And it's a wonderful, it's really a wonderful VMA. It's the biggest VMA in the state. It's the biggest VMA in the country. Actually. And it's organized spectacularly. I know that meeting because I was involved in some of its getting set up, was 8 months in the making. So it went off very well.
That sounds great. I wish I could watch it.
Okay, any other comments from the public? Oh, Mark, I look over in that direction.
I don't have any problems with this language, and I move to adopt it.
Okay.
Second.
Second? Okay, we have a motion to adopt and a second. Call for any more questions? No, I'm going to,
Public
any
comment.
questions from the board after that? Okay, public comment now. Sorry, we're just trying to follow the.
Yes, hi, Stacey Evans here. I'm the General Counsel with Elevate Sciences. I really thank you guys for the opportunity to come out here and, address any concerns that I have, and also your efforts to make the guidelines consistent with federal law. Definitely appreciate that. The concerns that I have, the way the revisions are, is that, the definition from the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of what a drug is, it really, it doesn't really say what that means. For instance, there are plenty of products out there in veterinary practices that can affect the structure and that do affect the structure of animals. I brought some examples like this. This is like fish oil. And then we have Denamarin and all these other supplements. These are supplements that the Food, Drug Administration, they do recognize that. They even have a policy that says that people can have animal supplements, that they are legal. And as long as the supplements don't make any explicit drug claims, and as long as they are safe, and, the ingredients that are in the label are actually in the product. And there's such a thing as hemp CBD animal supplements. And I think the way the guidelines are written on industrial hemp products, a veterinarian's going to look at this and think, oh, wow, I can't carry any type of hemp products, or even products like these, or even glucosamine. And I think maybe something that would help clarify that would be something that says that veterinarians, can use legal hemp CBD products. The FDA does acknowledge that there are legal hemp CBD products in their FAQs. And it really depends on how the manufacturer markets the products, not, what the veterinarian's going to use the products for. That's what they really focus on. And I think that it would be kind of helpful to include language that would make that distinction, to make it consistent with FDA position on this issue. So.
Thank you. Comments, Christine?
Yeah, I actually, when I was reading this, was wondering about some of the herbal supplements, because it does say, about it being a drug, and Denamarin is an example, but I don't think the FDA, I don't know whether the FDA has approved that or not, but also like other herbal supplements, the holistic vets that use things, but in particular, things like fish oil and Denamarin, and how that last sentence there, I was a little confused by that, and I didn't know how it could just apply to CBD when there's all these other products. So I had the same kind of question when I was looking at it, so I can just speak as a veterinarian. Reading it, I would have that same what's going on? So I'm not sure about that language.
And the FDA does not have to approve these. Like these supplements do not require FDA approval. FDA approves animal food, drugs, and medical devices. And there are plenty of other products that the FDA, that do not require FDA approval in order for the products to be legal.
Mark?
Like Dr. Pollard said, probably by next year, there's going to be a whole new set of regulations, and all this is going to be somewhat of a moot point. Our approach has been very cautious with this whole CBD, medical marijuana, cannabis-related issues. I think the difference is that hemp is not glucosamine or milk thistle or SAMe. There's much more of a familiarity with those supplements on what the appropriateness of them and the effects and so forth. There's many people in the veterinary community that would just like to be cautious until a little bit more information comes out on the effectiveness and the safety. That's the big difference, even though you make a good point that they all are similar in their oversight with the FDA, but that's an explanation for your point.
And I understand that, and there are studies ongoing and things that are popping up, and especially the last 6 months, and I can provide you with additional information on the safety and dosing.
Which is why it'll probably be all moved by next year. It's just slow, it just takes a long time.
Yeah, and I understand that, it is a new product, so.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So,
We have a motion and a second.
yeah, and the motion is to approve the revised guidelines. Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, I think we're going to take a let's try to make it quick in the interest of the public members that are still waiting. We'll be back here in, is 5 minutes enough? 5 minutes. Well. Agenda item number 7, and I'll hand it over to Jessica.
So members, as you recall from the last board meeting, we had some visitors and give a presentation about concerns regarding rodeos. At that time, the board had requested an overview of what the current statutory structure is for rodeos, who's in charge of what, who regulates it, and what role does the board have in all of this. So before you, I provided the statute, it's the Penal Code Section 596.7. That's regarding the regulations of rodeos. It is regulated by the local cities and counties, and they are the ones responsible for enforcing 596.7. I'm not going to read it verbatim for you guys. It is on the screen and in your packets, but it does give specific requirements for things that have to happen, and veterinarians do have a role in that. However, when it comes to violations of the specific rodeos, that's not something that the board would be enforcing. That's something that up to the local counties to enforce. They do have the ability to issue fines for violations, but that's not something that we would be authorized to issue. Our role is very minor when it comes to regulating rodeos, and that's looking at or collecting more the rodeo injury reports. There was a bill that was passed requiring this, in putting it into our Practice Act. That was AB 1980. And the reason this was passed, according to the analysis, was because the veterinarians weren't necessarily aware of this requirement. And so they wanted to put it in our act. So they it was right there for them. And then we can enforce this section by putting it into our act. So we can take action if we find that injuries occurred and veterinarians treated the animals and did not report to us. That would be a violation that we could enforce. If we had allegations that the standard of care was not followed when treating those animals, we would be able to take action under our Practice Act for that. I also provided you the link to what the rodeo animal injury report entails. It's very minimal information that we get. This was more of a data collection requirement. And I also provided you the list of the last fiscal years and the reports that we have been receiving. And so this is just to give you more for information on this topic, so you guys know what the statutory framework looks like. But we do have members from the public here who would also like to speak on the topic. And members, they provided handouts to you that are in front of you, and we have some extras, had some extras in the back. Oh, there's one on the table.
Okay, any questions or comments by the board? Yes, Mark.
Reviewing the presentation from last meeting, I do realize that our authority is limited as far as many of the issues that were raised at the last meeting. And then reading the package for this meeting, specifically under section 596.7B, do we have, I seem to remember, do we have some pending legislation that specifically addressed you can have an on-call veterinarian at a rodeo, but there was discussion about having a an RVT present as well that wouldn't replace the veterinarian, but there'd be an actual requirement. We didn't like the fact that there's a possibility that there was no veterinary oversight at all rodeos, and to address that problem, we raised the possibility of allowing an RVT to be there. So either the veterinarian or the RVT.
So that wasn't legislation that was passed, that was regulation.
Okay.
Wait.
And that's still pending in the
Yes.
whole process? Okay. It's somewhere in that
It's in this,
chart.
yeah.
Okay, any comments by the public?
Good morning, members of the board, Madam President. My name's Scott Dornkamp. I'm with the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. I am the Livestock Program and Government Relations Manager for the PRCA. I'm also an active contestant in the PRCA for the past 30 years, and I have also been involved in every level of rodeo from producing through stock contracting. I'd like to thank Mr. Stephanopoulos for inviting us here to speak today. After watching the video from the October board meeting, I felt it important to address the board regarding attending rodeo veterinarians at PRCA rodeos and compliance with California laws. As the largest organization for sanctioning body in the world, we sanction over 40 events in the state of California alone. Our rules require that a vet be on site for every performance and every section of slack, not on call, on site. There are fines levied if that doesn't happen. Since I am not a vet, I believe it'd be best to have 2 attending veterinarians from 2 of California's largest rodeos, Tim Eastman from California Rodeo, and Troy Ford from Clovis Rodeo, to speak today about how they comply with the Penal Code 596.7 and the Business and Professions Code Section 4830.8.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks for listening to us here today. I'm Tim Eastman, and I've been a veterinarian of record for the California Rodeo for over 15 years. I'm a 5th generation resident of Monterey County. I went to get my animal science degree from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and then graduated from UC Davis in '96 with my doctorate and a master's in preventative and veterinary medicine. Did an internship in a busy sports medicine practice in Littleton, Colorado, and then went on and did a surgical residency at Texas A&M and became boarded with the American College of Veterinary Surgeons in 2000 before moving back home to my native town of Salinas. And since that time, I've initially joined the practice I grew up in, which we have grown into one of the largest regional referral practices in the Western United States. We have over 20 veterinarians and at least a half a dozen specialists in 4 in surgery, 2 in medicine, and so on. Of our 20 veterinarians, all of them enthusiastically volunteer their time during our busiest month of the year on a rotating basis. And I am the chair of the veterinary committee that governs that role. As the head of the veterinary team, I'm out there prior to the competition every day, Thursdays and Fridays over 16 hours a day, Saturday and Sundays are daytime performances, probably about 10 to 12. And I've got anywhere from 2 to 6 other veterinarians from our practice that are out there helping me have eyes everywhere. I don't leave the arena. I stand where all of the timed event animals leave the arena, so I can personally be there if there's any issue with any of them, and have another veterinarian stationed over the bucking chutes because it's hard to get from one place to the other during the performance. And we communicate amongst each others during the day, and as well as local representatives from our SPCA, who we have provided with all areas wristbands access as long as I've been associated with it. And the SPCA communicates anything that they see, and we do the same with them. And so for as long as I can remember, our records have always agreed with what they've seen. in the rare occurrence of an injury, our team responds immediately. We take our job very seriously out there, and we try to provide the best possible outcome for the individual animal. In a typical year, we will treat 0 to 2 injuries, and we always turn in a report in compliance with Penal Code 596 within 48 hours of the conclusion of the rodeo. I initially, when I took over, I wasn't aware of this penal code, but soon became aware right after I became a director. And since then, I can tell you everybody associated with our committee and everybody that we talk to through the Northern California American Association of Equine Practitioners and just in our day-to-day life is aware of this code. We continue to make that public knowledge. We have well over 1,000 animal events. That's a horse coming out of a bucking chute or a team roping steer coming out of through the arena. And I've always been amazed at how few significant injuries really do occur with all those moving parts that we have out there. The same way I'm sometimes amazed at some of the horse shows that we cover in our practice. I'm going to add, the only event that we volunteer for is the California Rodeo, and we volunteer our time out there for the same reason that all of our other directors and 1,500 committee members volunteer their time. We're passionate about the importance of this event in our community. The thing that I learned looking at some of the numbers is we have the largest rodeo in the state of California with well over 1,000 animal events a year. And so some of the smaller 1 or 2 day ones that don't report any injuries, I think your reporting is accurate, and I think that the veterinarians of the state are doing a great job at complying to it. Example, last year in 2019, the only injury that I had was what was called a capped horn. A steer basically scraped his horn while coming through the chutes, and it had some blood on it. So we took him out of the competition, we cleaned it up, and we sprayed some antibiotic spray on there. And then, in compliance with 596, we submitted the injury report within 48 hours after the conclusion of the rodeo and eliminated that animal from competition, even though it was a very mild abrasion of a structure that does not even have a nerve supply. But I wanted to briefly respond to the allegations. I watched the public comment portion of the prior meeting of the Veterinary Medical Board last October. I can tell you I've personally been a target of showing animals respect and kindness in Mr. Hindy for many years. We believe that he wants to politicize the statutory reporting requirements of veterinarians and the Veterinary Medical Board to further his agenda, which is to try to diminish or outlaw the sport of rodeo in the state of California. He even went so far as to sue me individually in 2014, alleging that I failed to report injuries to this board. The court sided with me. The Veterinary Medical Board investigated our duties out there, and everybody found us to be in complete compliance with 596. Based on his actions, I can only assume he wants to dissuade veterinarians from serving as attending veterinarians for rodeos. As a veterinarian, I've decided I want to be a veterinarian when I was about 9 years old and love animals and strive to promote animal health and welfare and relieve animal suffering. It's upsetting to me that certain groups in today's society want to attack the veterinarians in their agenda to eliminate rodeos. We take pride in what we do out there, and we're constantly looking for ways to make it safer and safer for the contestants as well as the animals, of course. And we have nothing to hide. We give the SPCA all areas wristbands, and we would love to invite any members of this board to come down and see what we do. And I'm sure that at the end of we say rodeo, the Spanish pronunciation from Salinas, everyone else in the world is rodeo, but I'd love to have you come down. I could personally show you around, show you the facilities, and let you attend the event. Thank you.
I would like to thank the board members for allowing me a small amount of time to provide my information on being an attending veterinarian at a large rodeo. My background, first of all, my name's Troy Ford. I've been a large animal veterinarian since 1985. Much like Tim, I did specialty training at the University of Pennsylvania at New Bolton Center, eventually obtaining the degree of board certification in surgery. I spent a few years at Texas A&M right before Tim arrived, and since then I've been in private practice near my hometown in Central California, near Clovis and Fresno. It has been my lifelong ambition to be a veterinarian, and I take being a veterinarian very, very seriously. I think that the most important thing that I would like to get across here today is what is my duty as an attending veterinarian at a rodeo? Because we do have the public there, I think it's very important that we put on a proper showing that demonstrates that these animals are being taken care of, as well as the contestants. I receive no financial benefit. My time is completely volunteered during my most busiest time of the year. Unlike Dr. Eastman, I am a solo practitioner, so that week is a very difficult week for me. But I do it out of the love of animals as well as for the sport of rodeo. I will just describe briefly that as required by the PRCA, I'm on premise at all times for any type of competition, whether that is being a performance or slack competition. I'm there when the animals arrive, and I am there when the animals leave, both the contracted animals as well as the contested animals. I'm responsible for the health and well-being of any and all animals that are on the premise, whether that's the contracted animals or whether that's a contested animal. I inspect these animals every day at the beginning, during, and afterwards, much like Dr. Eastman. And if there is anything identified that could be defined as an injury, we immediately examine, and to play it on the safe side, we usually will drop it out of the competition. Making medical notes, we do the diagnosis and treatment and aftercare if necessary. That's really what our job entails. But in addition to that, I think we work very closely with not only the PRCA judges, but the committee members as well, working as one big team. And I think some of the other things that we do is that we're always preparing for the emergency situation. That is if there is an injury, if there is, that we are prepared. How are we going to take care of that animal? How are we going to ambulate this animal out of the arena? Whatever. We are trying to be prepared for all things, and we practice almost on a yearly basis for these situations, which fortunately rarely occur. And then finally, at the end of the within 48 hours of the completion of the rodeo, we fill out, as required by the Veterinary Medical Board, any and all injuries that we come across. I tend to diagnose sometimes. If there's any question in my mind that there is an injury, I will go ahead and remove it from competition. And that's speaking of injuries. In addition, when you have hundreds of animals on the premise, you're also going to have illness. And we don't even speak about illness. We're just talking about injury. So I will, also at that time make recommendations to remove those and treat accordingly. And as a result, we turn these in. I would say, as a point of suggestion, is maybe we can, at some point in the future, talk about revising our rodeo competition form that might be slightly more in-depth, maybe more descriptive, maybe follow-up care, who's the animal being released to, et cetera, et cetera. But that would be a suggestion that we could look at in the future. And And finally, I will do the same as Dr. Eastman, since it sounds like we may be having a meeting in Fresno. That sounds very fun, and that's just right next door, is
See, there you go.
we would invite any and all to come by. And Cheryl, I expect you to be there, since you'll be there, to please, come by and see. We really have nothing to hide. And like I said, I'm in this for the love of the animal, and I'm providing no financial gain to myself or my clinic.
Thank you, Dr. Ford, for being here. So how many injuries have you seen at the Clovis Rodeo in the last few years?
Well, I have all of my records since I think we started reporting, I think in 2010. And that's one thing I wanted to bring up when you showed the number of injured animals and reports. That must be a typo, because I have reported 6 animals that were removed from competition, either due to illness or injury. In 2019, it shows only 2 injuries there. So somehow the accounting.
Did you identify them as either ill or injured? Maybe that's why, maybe they.
Yes. Yeah, so I had 3 that were injured, primarily soreness around the neck and brisket region, and 2 of them that had upper respiratory symptoms. And the other one had a sore neck as well. And it identifies what competition they were in and their identification number, so we know exactly which animal we're talking about.
So if you can provide those to me, because I know it's not a typo as far as what's in, where the reports go, because my staff manually went through each one and I saw them all. But I would like to see those, and we can adjust the records and find out what happened.
Certainly, just for 2019?
I think for all of them.
I'd welcome all of them, just to make sure our records are correct.
Sure. And this is just
this is
the
yours.
Clovis Rodeo, so I can't speak for any other rodeo, but I will be glad to provide those to you.
Mark and then Alana.
I used to say Kiev, but now I say Kiev. So from now on, I'll say Rodeo. Again, our authority over rodeos is limited. We don't oversee rodeos. And you're all 3 a part of the PRCA? Is that what you said?
Only Scott is here on the part of the PRCA. Dr. Ford and myself are hospital owners near a large California rodeo.
And that stands for the Professional
Rodeo Cowboy Association.
Cowboy Association, okay. And that's a private, it's not a state-sanctioned organization, it's just like a professional association.
No, it's a nonprofit organization based out of Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Okay. I think what we've heard a lot is some complaints about, and I'm a terrible Latino because I forgot the name of the Mexican rodeos. Chaparreros, caballeros.
You
I'm
are
really
terrible.
bad. I'm 4th generation. But those, you don't oversee those ones, because you said there's
No,
40 events, and those are 40 of your rodeos.
No,
And there's a lot more of these other types of rodeos going on.
correct. I can only speak for the rodeos we sanction.
Okay. I admire the professionalism that you've displayed today as far as caring for the animals. Can you comment on what happens at those rodeos? Do they have the same standards? And is there any outreach opportunities your association can do to help oversee those events?
As of right now, I cannot comment. However, I can do outreach to them.
I think that's what the biggest problem is.
That's possible.
I'd like to add to that. I also sit on the Equine Advisory Council for the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and we try to have all the different industries represented. I'm there for private practice, but we have people from the trails community, jumping, quarter horses, thoroughbred racing, and we now have our newest members from the Taro community, and there's a lot of different kind of events that happen, but high school rodeo is another situation. But Dr. Ford and our rodeo, the animals are going a lot faster, moving a lot harder, and the competition is a lot more intense than you would see at most of these others. And so we've been asked to cover other rodeos, and we don't have the staff. And we cover Salinas, and we put our hearts into it for the same reason everybody else, like I said, but for one out of town, I don't think that we could get one of our veterinarians to give up a weekend off without charging a significant amount of money, which a lot of these, smaller rodeos just don't have in their budgets.
So can I ask a question? So you guys are paid to be at the rodeo, is that correct?
No, we are volunteers very much. I did the math once on what it costs me to be the veterinarian of record at the California Rodeo, and it was amazing, but I do it because I love the sport and I love what it does to our community, and it's been a longstanding tradition, so.
And so because you're volunteers, does that mean that there's times when there is no vet available for rodeo?
I'm out there from before the slack happens during the day because there's too many contestants in the timed events, the team roping and the steer wrestling and the tie down roping. And so I'm out there whenever anything is happening personally. And I usually have at least one or two other veterinarians with me during the day. At night, I've got 5 or 6, which is kind of overkill because usually nothing happens, but a lot of our veterinarians enjoy being out there. And a lot of it is the contestants are kind of gypsies. They don't, they're from out of state and they might have needs for medicine or other things or just questions. And so I don't leave the arena because I need to be there if something happens.
And that's just for the rodeos in Salinas that you work?
I have covered other ones in the past, but I just
primarily
just Salinas.
So you couldn't necessarily speak on the other rodeos in the state of California outside of Salinas, and if they have veterinarians that also volunteer their time?
I think most of the PRCA ones probably do have veterinarians that are involved in their local community that volunteer their time as well, but I'm really not sure if any of them charge for that or not.
Does the PRCA keep data on that?
Yes, we have data on which vet is at each rodeo.
And if the veterinarians are present at each rodeo?
They are, by rule, supposed to be there.
That's the rules that you've enacted as an
Correct,
organization, not because the states force you to do that?
correct.
Okay.
At Salinas, we've done it for many years prior to it being a law, but we also sign in, we've got a sign-in sheet, we sign in and we sign out every day that we're out there.
Okay.
And we also fill out a report for the PRCA as well as this board.
So is the thought that it's the smaller rodeos that may be having injuries and not reporting, that's why our numbers are so low? Or, can you give any kind of?
From the numbers that have been reported to me, the numbers in California match our national numbers almost exactly. So analyzing the data that I have, I would say the numbers are accurate.
Okay.
Now, I will get a hold of the vets for all the rodeos that we sanction and remind them about the reporting procedures. There's no problem with that.
But you guys don't see all the rodeos in California, correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay. What percentage of the rodeos do you oversee in California? Would you say, rough?
I couldn't even guess.
You couldn't guess, okay.
I have no idea. No one really knows how many of these small rodeos go on.
Yeah, okay, Ken.
That is correct. It goes anywhere from the PRCA down to high school rodeos, and there could be just a one-day private event that nobody even knows about.
I would love to see you guys do outreach for that.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It cleared up some things in my mind because I'm not a rodeo activist or fan, or I've never been, but clearly there's different tiers, and the PRCA, obviously you mentioned you have 40 sanctioned events a year, and you're required to have a vet, and you'd like to have at least maybe 2 vets, but they're all required. We just don't know what the total number of rodeo events are in the state of California and the management of those, I guess, and not that it's under our board's purview anyway, but it sounds like, the other events could do a lot with your policies, if they can, to create a better and healthier, safer facility for all the animals. And I think that's where the angst is, some of those other events that do not have those requirements, your internal organizational requirements.
From my experience, just because I have a son that high school rodeoed and is currently in college rodeo, and also goes to amateur rodeos. Almost all of those organizations use our rules in one way or another. So maybe not exactly written the way ours are, but for the most part.
Okay, thank you.
Cheryl. Kind of a follow-up question to Dr. Ford. So so in 2019, you saw 3 injured animals at the Clovis Rodeo, but out of how many total animals? Total animals over the whole rodeo, ballpark?
800, 900
Okay.
runs.
So you're saying that the injury rate is really low?
That is absolutely true. And when I look back at my records, it's very consistent.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
I'm sorry. That is true. The injury rate that I have noted, being the attending at Clovis Rodeo, is very low. It's not to say that we have not had injuries, but it is very low, surprisingly low. If you would ask most people, they would think it would be much higher than that. But I think that the way that these rodeos are run, the rules, the regulations of what they can and can't do, I think has certainly improved the quality of the animal's life, as well as reduced injuries dramatically.
Okay. And those injuries that you do see, you said that, 3 had sore necks. But I would assume there would be some injuries that would just be from taking a horse out of a trailer. That could happen anywhere.
And that's true, and those would be like, say, a contestant animals.
Yes.
And so if something gets injured in the trailer or in the trip there, we are going to be taking care of that animal as well. And but as a lot of rodeo cowboys, a lot of them that are traveling from town to town do a lot of their own type of veterinary medicine themselves. So, there's maybe a number of injuries that we don't know about or see that they're being taken care of by somebody else.
Okay. So if we're working on a new form, then maybe you should also include, was this animal injured in the process of a rodeo, or was it some ancillary type of event? Like taking a horse out of a trailer, that could happen anywhere.
Christina.
Thank you guys for coming and talking. It really, to me, is great to hear another side of the picture, and it is different than I thought based on some of the other testimony, and it has helped me a lot to understand. How often is an animal hurt bad enough to warrant like euthanasia, would you say? It sounds like not that often, but have you ever had to euthanize an animal there?
It does happen. We, maybe 1 year out of 5 or so, given the number of events, if there's any chance that we can save them, say one with several years ago, we had a calf in the tie-down roping that had a tibia fracture that we splinted immediately as it came out of the arena, took radiographs of, and it looked like it had a good chance of healing. Cattle are amazing at healing things, and after being at our hospital for a month or so, he was taken out of the food chain and living his days out on a ranch in South County, which is what we do at Salinas. We do that pro bono, and our veterinarians take care of any time that would happen, but it's surprisingly rare. I've just got one word of caution about expanding on the form that we fill out. I like it being brief, because anything that I put in there has become a target of social media attacks, and if the purpose of the board is to serve as a storehouse and then take veterinary, action where the standard of practice has not been adhered to, a lot of times that's our judgment, and I think whether or not I decide to treat an animal is something that I decide on a case-by-case basis. And like Dr. Ford, I always err on the side of treatment, and I err on the side of reporting. But there was one report that I filled out that had my home address on it that was posted on social media, and I got, my staff was harassed. If you read the comments under that posting, there were death threats. And I think I'm doing a good job, or a good thing out there, being there for the animals, but some of the consequences of the good deeds that we do are, can have, I think, really profound impacts.
I have another.
Oh, Mark.
So, can I request that our executive officer report back to us at a later date? I'm a bit concerned about this discrepancy about how many reports Dr. Ford reported and how many reports received we have listed on our official tally there. And then also, confidentiality. I don't like hearing the fact that retaliation may be occurring. That definitely would decrease the reports that are being sent in, if that's going on.
I agree.
Yes.
Any other comments from the board? I would personally like to thank you very much. I know it's hard to come, you're busy, it comes out of your income as well as your tide to be here, but it's so important that you bring us the other side of the story, and if you'd watched the video on the prior meeting, it was unfortunate there wasn't more educational information that we had, at that meeting, and I apologize for the personal attacks. I mean, I think that is very disturbing to hear, and we take that very seriously as well. So really appreciate your time coming here and working with us.
We're excited to have a channel of communication between us and you folks, so I left my card. Don't hesitate to call. My cell phone's on there if I can ever be of any service. Same with Dr. Ford or anybody else in our committee if you'd rather hear from somebody other than me.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other public comment, I think.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think these are his comments.
Good morning. My name is Marilyn Jasper, Humane Society of the Sierra Foothills. Like most people, I choose to pay for professional veterinary services because I care for my animals. The work of a rodeo attending or on-call vet is similar to my office or home visits, but theirs is a lawfully mandated rodeo expense for that professional expertise, as well as the reporting of injuries. Included among veterinary laws to both protect and hold vets responsible are mandates to report to local authorities reasonable cause or professional suspicion of neglect, abuse, cruelty, or other illegalities. That veterinary reporting law for 4830.7 refers to an animal under the vet's care. And that means all the rodeo stock animals that are on the site. Reasonable cause includes witnessing abnormal behavior inside the chute or the holding corrals, or witnessing illegal electrical shocks being applied to sensitive surface hide, or anally, as depicted in the videos that we have seen, sadistically inflicting pain for agitated performances. The law is clear. It shall be the duty of the vet to report it promptly. Today's staff report does say this board is not responsible for penal code enforcement or penalties. That's true, but 4830 is not about enforcing the law. It is about critically important reporting of animal abuse or welfare crimes to law enforcement immediately. There's a big difference. It's a subtle difference, but there's a difference that we're talking about here. Legally, there should be no difference between a vet seeing signs of abuse or cruelty in an exam room or seeing it in a rodeo chute, holding pen, or arena. Veterinarians are highly respected professionals, the lifeline for animals under their care, and that's what 4830 is all about and why it's so vital. This board, you folks, have the authority and the capacity to help close rodeo's abusive loopholes and clarify veterinarians' legal rights and obligations for themselves and for animals. We are willing to assist in any way in such a much needed effort as are our court-appointed humane officers. And amazingly enough, we agree with what some of the conditions or ideas, suggestions by the previous speakers. Thank you.
Questions? Okay. Good afternoon. Ms. Nolan, members of the board, I want first of all thank you for all your work on behalf of animals. You play a critical role in this. My name is Eric Mills. I'm Coordinator of Action for Animals based in Oakland. The packet I just handed out to you contains a number of things. There's a pamphlet which is in conjunction with a new short rodeo documentary called Bucking Tradition, which is on YouTube now. Website on the back, you might want to take a look and see the need. The PRC was invited to take part in the film, but they declined. I'm by default the executive producer. But the film has won several prizes recently for animal welfare issues, so hope you'll take a look at it. Also in the packet is a copy of the statement I'm going to read from, a page from the minutes on these same subjects from your board meeting back in April of 2016. A collection of rodeos in the last 7 months here in California. A compilation of quotes from the rodeo cowboys themselves, quite extraordinary, some of them. And most importantly, a copy of an unbacked bill looking for an author. February 21st is the deadline. It would amend current law, which Senator Don Parada carried for me. It was Senate Bill 1462 back in 1999, and it passed pretty well. The original language would have required on-site veterinarians at every rodeo in California. The PRCA, the Farm Bureau, Bob Fox, and their allies weakened the language to allow for an on-call vet option. As a result, that's what most rodeos go for because it's cheaper, and animals are suffering accordingly. I just got copies of all the injury reports for the last 7 months, June 1st to December 31st. Two. You better look for a star in the east. It's a miracle. One of them was from Dr. Eastman, as he noted, the steer with a bloody horn. The other one was a horse with a case of colic. In those 7 months, there were 27 rodeos sanctioned by the PRCA, plus the junior rodeo at Livermore, junior rodeo at Hayward, junior rodeo at Woodside, and the kids' rodeos, the Little Britches rodeos. One of my Charro friends, and I was a sponsor of the bill back in 1993 to outlaw horse tripping at the Mexican rodeos, the charreadas. One of my Charro friends tells me there are 800 charreadas held in California every year, every weekend, pretty much April through October. Of the reports we have now, what is it? About 80, I think. One came from a charreada. That is simply not possible. These folks are still doing horse tripping and steer tailing. There's no publicity. Vets are not being called. Reports are not being made or submitted. Speaking of the reports, I think it would be wise if this board would require one report per injury, because some of these reports in here, and I have them all, thanks to Dr. Ford and Dr. Eastman, they type well and easily read. But quite often, somebody scribbled down 3 different injuries on one page, so it really gets confusing. So I think you should require one report per injury. from each, whoever the vet is. Now, the law, bill that I'm proposing now would require either a vet on site or an RVT on site with a licensed vet on call. And they really shouldn't have to do that, but there are a lot of RVTs around who will work much cheaper. I'm trying to give the cowboys a break there somewhat, which they don't really deserve. I had picket lines at the California Rodeo in Salinas for 17 straight years. 1995, I was there on the picket line when 5 animals were killed one weekend. Dr. Eastman's before his time. 2 on the racetrack, a horse with a heart attack, another with a broken leg. 3 in the arena. A horse in the wild horse race broke his neck running into the fence, probably her neck. Had to be euthanized. A steer with a broken neck in the wrestling event. And most egregious of all, a calf roping jerk down, broken back. And they trucked him off to slaughter. They didn't euthanize him on the spot, so even when the vets were present, and I talked to Dr. Kent Fowler, I don't know where he is now, I said, Doc, did he get any painkillers? He said, oh no, that runs the meat for human consumption. I said, you bastard. I said, you let that baby animal suffer, probably for 2 days, I was told, with a broken back and terrified to save $125 on the meat, when your rodeo at the time was bringing in $13 million to Salinas every year. So his license should have been revoked for malpractice. Just not acceptable. Interestingly, that was the first year that the PRCA began to require on-site veterinarians at all of their rodeos. There was huge outcry after that. The wild horse race was dropped. And now they do require vets at all their rodeos. I'll give them credit for that. But damn it, they opposed the bill to change, for on-site for all rodeos. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If they're so concerned, then they should underwrite maybe the little rodeos who can't afford the vets or volunteer, as these 2 doctors do for the good of the community. But, so that state law was also amended in 2007 by Aldrich Strickland, a Republican from Southern California, so as to include the chariatas by definition, because their rodeos are even worse than ours, which is saying something. But it's a national sport in Mexico. Even Cesar Chavez was opposed to all of rodeos, including chariata, and was an outspoken critic. Should note that racetracks, horse shows, endurance rides all require on-site veterinarians as well. They should. Why not all rodeos? Every rodeo I've ever attended always had an ambulance and paramedics to care for injured cowboys as well. They should. You think the cowboys would let one of their people lie there for an hour waiting for an on-call medic? It is wrong on so many levels. England abolished rodeos in 1934 because of the inherent cruelty. True sport involves equally matched, willing contestants. Rodeo does not comply. Most of rodeo is bogus from the get-go. Real cowboys on the ranch never rode bulls. They didn't ride bareback. They didn't wrestle steers. They didn't practice calf ropings at the time of the event. They certainly didn't put flank straps on the bulls and horses or work them over with hot shots in the holding chutes, which they do at almost every rodeo I've ever been to. They're handheld now. It's hard to catch them in the act. But guilty, guilty, guilty. Cotton Ross was caught 3 different times shocking horses at the Royal Ranch. And he's the Pro Rodeo Legend of the Year for last year. Nice guy, doing bad things to animals. Not Cotton, but his employees, probably his kids. Anyway, there's that. As I say, only 2 injury reports in the last 7 months, with at least 40 rodeos sanctioned by the PRCA, probably double that number of the amateur events. And 800 chariatas, that's hard to believe, but I have no reason to doubt it. So that really needs to change. I think that will about do me. So I'm hoping, the main thing is, though, find an author for this bill to require an on-site veterinarian or a registered veterinary technician on site with a licensed vet on call. If they can't provide at least this, all the rodeos should be abolished. If you can't afford a vet, then by God, you should not be putting on a rodeo. All sporting events have ambulances and paramedics there for the players. The animals, for almost all of the animals, the horses and bulls included, it's just a detour en route to the slaughterhouse. They're not there by choice. And rodeo is a macho exercise and domination. Read some of those quotes in there about what my britches when I saw some of them. And some of them are from major cowboys who know better. Just god-awful stuff. But as we We need to treat the animals better than we do now, and do all this in the name of entertainment and fun and to make a profit. And then they quite often boast that they give a lot of the money to local charities. I said, yeah, it's called blood money. It is unethical. It is immoral. You do not abuse one group of sentient beings to help another. I don't give a damn what the cause is. It is wrong, and it needs to stop. So I'm hoping, again, I appreciate your work. I hope you can do all you can to rectify this sorry situation. Thank you much.
Christina?
Any questions?
Hi, thank you for coming. I'm just wondering, I know that it looks in here like you sponsored the first bill that.
I was the sponsor.
Yeah, for the writer. What was the pushback against, like, because the original bill had an on-site veterinarian for everything.
Requirement. The concern was that a lot of the little rodeos could not afford to have a veterinarian. The argument is, if you can't afford a vet, then by God, you can't put on a rodeo. It's the price of doing business. This is not just fun and games. We're talking life and death here quite often. I have injury reports from the PRC for 5 different years in the early 2000s stating that on average, an animal was killed or injured at 57% of their sanctioned events nationwide. They sponsor about 600 events throughout the country, and they do require a vet on site, but everyone should have that basic requirement, seems to be, and money should not be the only obstacle.
So it was just the cost, and that was what they were.
That was their argument.
Okay.
But even when the vets are there, sometimes they don't do their job either, like Dr. Fowler, who sent that calf off to slaughter. I said at the time, don't you think it would be reasonable to require immediate euthanasia for any fatally injured animal? He said, yeah, that sounds reasonable. He'd run it by the board. I don't know if he did or not. But it's this macho attitude is destroying the planet. It's really just a microcosm of what's wrong. That's all that male entitlement, a lot of it. Look at some of the quotes, what they say about women in those quotes. It's just breathtaking. Anyone else?
I mean, it sounds like we're making progress in that we heard from the PRCA today that even though legally rodeos are required to have either an on-call veterinarian or, but their rules say that they need to have a veterinarian on premise for all of their 40 sanctioned events. Even though they just did it last year, better late than never. So in that regard, I think there's progress being made. The biggest problem are these 800 chaparyaras. I'm getting closer. I mean, I can't imagine, honestly, I can't imagine there being veterinary or RVT oversight in all of those. We can't say that all those must follow the PRCA's rules because they're not a state agency. They're a private organization.
Sure.
They don't have to do what we tell them to do at all. But my recommendation to them was to try to do some outreach for these 800 events. And sometimes you have to have strange bedfellows to get things done. As crazy as it sounds, I would encourage you to maybe work with their association to accomplish this outreach, to get better things done.
We tried, but they wouldn't want to be in our film. I don't know why.
Well, being in your film is not the same thing as working together on outreach for these events.
Okay, Kathy?
That's my thoughts.
You know, something you might keep in mind too, California State Education Code 6042 mandates that kindness to animals and humane treatment be taught in the public schools, K through 12. Seems to me taking kids to rodeos is a violation of that mandate. Every humane society in the country condemns rodeo for its inherent cruelty. God's truth, and it's ignored willy-nilly.
Kathy?
And I'll get in bed with anybody to move this forward. So let's make it happen. We're basically trying to clean up the slave quarters when the whole thing should be abolished, as it has been in many places in the world.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to everything you've said. Excuse me, but I'm just a little cautious. For the veterinary board in our purview, we have a very limited mandate here, as you know, and I appreciate your testimony and the materials and everything. I'm just wondering if there are this is a local issue in some cases and what you want to achieve, and maybe it's a legislation issue of mandating it at all permitted rodeos in the state, but it's nothing that our board can do anything about. What we can do, and I think is helpful, is clarify the reporting process, which is our mandate, and I was quite interested in the difference between injuries and abuse that the last proponent spoke about. But, so I think that's something we should take a look at, but on the global picture here, it's just not under our control, as you know, and I know you know that. I just wanted to make sure we were all
But I think
of
all
the
of
same
have
mind.
connections too, so I'm hoping we can find an author over here in the Capitol to carry this legislation. Let's be clear too, the charreadas, the 800, if there are that many, that's astounding. That's 10 times as many rodeos. They are required by law to have a veterinarian either on site or on call. And with only one in 20 years, that is not possible. So either they don't know or the vets are not being called because no reports are coming in. I worked on a case in Denver a couple of years ago. 7 steers had their tails stripped to the bone in one afternoon, plus a broken pelvis and a broken leg had to be destroyed in one afternoon at a steer tailing event. And it's standard, brutal stuff. All that macho crap again. I just had it up to here with that attitude. It needs to stop. So appreciate any help you can do. Circulate that bill. Find me an author.
I'd like,
Yes, thank you. My name's Bill Gage. I'm representing Social Compassion and Legislation. We're very much in support of Mr. Miller's efforts here.
It will be punished accordingly.
Bill, would you mind speaking closer to the microphone?
I'm sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
We're very much in support of Mr. Miller's efforts here in terms of, trying to make some changes to the reporting requirements. We did put it in the Practice Act with legislation in terms of, we thought that would be more hands-on in terms of veterinarians, in terms of actually making the reports to the board itself so that appropriate action could be taken. We think that this is an effort that I think, Mr. Mills is going to, try to at least find an author to look at the reporting requirements, how we can improve them. We would like to work with the board, if we could, in terms of what efforts the board might think there are other changes that we could bring about in terms of assuring that you do get the reports you need from the veterinarians. So we're just hopeful that, that's sort of the direction we can come together on in terms of working with the board and hopefully bringing about those changes. So we appreciate, anything the board can do in terms of, what they think could be improved from the reporting standpoint. And with that, hopefully we can, at least the reports you should be receiving from the veterinarians responsible. Thank you.
great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate both of your comments. I just would like to ask the board, I'm feeling very compelled. We've asked several of our public members who have waited to give public comment regarding the emergency fee increase, and we've asked them to wait till now after 12:30. Would the board be willing to continue on so they would have time for public comment before this afternoon? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and move on then.
Okay, so we're going to move on to agenda item 10A, status update on pending regulations. I did provide an update in your packet. For the sake of time and for the amount of public comment we have on this topic, I'd like to just jump right into the emergency fee increase. This is what the board had approved in October, and the rulemaking was filed with the Secretary of State's office and approved by OAL on January 27th, and it was effective immediately. So the next steps for this is to finalize that packet through the regular rulemaking process. There will be another 45-day public comment period. It's just going to follow the normal process, and we have a deadline of July 24th, 2020 to do that. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the members and public comment.
Okay, I think in the interest of time, we'd like to open up for public comment.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Ryan Dowling. I'm with the International Longshore Warehouse Union. That might seem like an uncommon fit, but we represent workers in the veterinary support industry up and down the West Coast. I'm here today to express to you, we understand your guys' need to generate revenue. Your revenue and that oversight helps make patient care possible. We understand the caseload we heard yesterday, that folks have over 500 cases to follow up on, report on, track that data. That's important data to improve the standards of care. However, we feel that this fee increase is disproportionately on the support staff. These workers are not only undercompensated, not only do they have to spend their own money for continuing education, not only do they live in some of the most expensive places in our country, but this fee can have the opposite effect. We feel that workers may not renew the licensing, which again has an adverse effect on the industry. We also feel that there are a number of employers. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the state of California. There are a number of companies, some are present, that generate revenue in the millions and billions. And we would encourage, in working partnership, working with them to find ways to generate revenue. We also understand that a number of businesses that are smaller than that can't afford a tax increase. But we just ask the board that we work in partnership and find ways to generate revenue outside of just increasing fees on the support staff that make this industry possible. That's it.
Thank you.
Nancy Earlker with the California RVT Association. I concur with everything that the previous speaker just said, and I would just like to remind you that, as he said, RVTs are a relatively low-paid profession, and we have, before you did the increase, we already have heard from RVT candidates that because of the high student loans that they have to pay back when they graduate from programs, often they don't even bother applying for the exam and for licensure because they can't afford it, the out-of-pocket expense. This increase of over 100% in the RVT licensing fees is going to, it's no question about it, and you're going to have fewer RVT applicants and you're going to have fewer RVT licensees because RVTs will not be, some RVTs will not be renewing their licenses, and you may end up in the ironic position of making less money off of licensing fees than you were before. I would encourage you strongly to consider the sliding scale premise permit fee to reverse this RVT fee increase, and I would hope that you would want do emergency legislation to get that in place as soon as possible so that you can reverse this fee increase, which is unbearable to the RVT profession.
Thank you.
Valerie Fenstermaker, CVMA. In the letter that we wrote to the board in response during the 5-day comment period, we did outline our understanding of the need for the fee increase. We also recognize that it is a very large hardship on all veterinary professionals, but particularly on the RVT profession, and asked if there was any way that that could be looked at. In speaking with Jessica recently, my understanding is that the fee increase will likely become effective, and correct me if I'm wrong, on Monday. However, that there may be a possibility down the road of relooking at the fees, particularly for the RVTs. And I just would like some clarification of that for all of us. Thank you.
So when I reported on that Friday, it was effective Monday, so they are effective now, just to clarify. They took effect on the 27th. But what I was referring to is the conversation that the board had. As you all know, this was highly discussed and really difficult for the board to decide. But one of the board members had said that potentially during our sunset bill, when we're looking at fees, lowering the fees for the RVTs, but then increasing it for veterinarians to help offset that cost. And so I think that's what the board was discussing, so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think premise.
I'm sorry, yes.
Premises.
And yeah, the board was committed to looking at all of that in order to reduce these fees for the RVT community.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that it's a mystery to me why you did not increase the VACSP to its statutory maximum.
Yeah, so I can clarify that as well. We actually are already at the statutory cap. This authority comes from the statute for $100 for VACSPs. However, when the regulation went through, they essentially cut it up. They created an initial application fee and then an initial license fee. Both of them total were $50, which is the statutory max. So even though when you're looking at a $50 application fee, it's a $50 application fee, a $50 license fee, which is the max in the statute.
So they end up paying $100.
Yeah, so right now, we're already at the statutory max, so the board could not raise it anymore.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Hi, Liz Houston I'm an RVT in California. I'm president of the National Veterinary Professionals Union. I want to thank the ILWU, our partner, for coming today and talking about this really disproportionate and disheartening fee increase for RVTs in California. I know you guys at your last meeting discussed some information about whether or not practices pay for their RVTs fees, and I know Dr. Waterhouse does, Dr. Nunez's practice does. I did a very informal and scientific survey on, I administer groups on Facebook of vet techs that cover around 40,000 people or so from various groups. I had 145 California RVTs respond, and our results were kind of in line with the CVMA economic survey results that showed that approximately 53% of practices pay their RVTs fees. Out of those respondents, some of them said that they have to pay the fees themselves or are reimbursed. This is a lot different from veterinarians, where the practice usually pays the fee outright for their license. RVTs are expected to float that expense until the practice can get around to paying them back. And a few of them said they can get reimbursement for those fees, but it comes out of their CE allowance. So they're still required to do CE to renew their license, but in order to renew their license, they will end up paying for it themselves. So the idea that the majority of practices in the state, I mean, it's a slim majority that pay their RVT fees, but this is falling on the lowest paid licensees of this board. And it is falling on them disproportionately. If you look at earning potential and power, veterinarians make approximately 3 times, probably more, but if you look at the BLS statistics, it's around 3 times more. If you look at the median salary, veterinarians, DVMs make around 3 times more than RVTs, and our fees are going to be almost the same, and that's just wrong.
Cheryl. Just for some information, I also was at the CVMA meeting where they talked about the economic survey that CVMA did. And in their survey, there were 684 RVTs that were surveyed, and 58% of them said their license fees were paid by the practice. Just FYI.
Hi there, this is Anita with CARVTA, the California RVT Association.
Can you speak closer to the microphone? Thank you.
I just wanted to point out that a couple of things. One of the things is that even if practice pays for that licensing fee for that technician and for the doctors for that matter, those costs still get passed on somewhere else. We're still going to see potentially increases. I'm assuming that clients would end up having to pay for. That was one of my big concerns about this, amongst all the other ones that have already been mentioned. Another concern that I have is that we get, I'm sure we've already talked about it, we've already hit on it, but we get lots of messages, questions about how can they get their questions answered from the board? How can they get their licenses issued from the board? At CARVTA, we get a lot of mail on that topic, as you might imagine. So now if we double the fees, there's going to be a little bit more of an expectation that that kind of thing is going to be cleared up. And I guess that's one of my points, is that I hope that is something that we'll be discussing a little bit later on today, but I was open to hearing any information you had about that.
About what we're doing to streamline the licensing process?
Yes, I'm anticipating that question, that if we're going to pay more money,
Yeah.
then they're going to have a bigger expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if we weren't doing a fee increase, that needs to improve. The services or lack thereof that we're providing our stakeholders, to me, is unacceptable. And I think it's something that and I know it's something that we have been looking at and doing internally, and using a lot of different resources to streamline, to make it faster for the stakeholders. But as far as more information, we'll be talking about it during our licensing portion of our meeting tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board comment? Any other public comment? Okay. I think we're running well past the lunch hour, so I think that we're going to go ahead and take a break for lunch, and then we will go ahead and reconvene at 2 p.m. Thank you very much.